Welcome back to Superhuman Customs. I'm Steven Human. Today we have something really cool. So this is the Armored Superman from the mini-series, I guess it was 12 issues or whatever, of Superman Unchained from the New 52 drawn by Jim Lee. And at one point, end of the story, Superman puts on this armor to fight the military or something. I don't even remember. Didn't really sit in my brain. But I've wanted this guy for a while because I want to turn him into Steel. Now, obviously, you know who Steel is from the original Death of Superman and Return of Superman comics. He is a great figure, and this guy makes a perfect Steel base. Now, there's a few things we're going to do to him. First of which, I'm going to be adding some piping along here and along the legs. I don't like how thin his waist is. It just doesn't look right. And on some of the Steel figures I've seen other people do, that's been a sticking point for me. So I think with some piping here, that'll fix it. And we're gonna add a cape. This is gonna be a really, really great process. Now what I'm gonna use for the head, because obviously this head does not work. It's a weird, funky head. So what I got is a wrestling figure. This is the first time I've tried anything like this. This guy's head is pretty perfect. It's a bigger head, which we want because obviously it's John Henry Irons in a, in a helmet. So I don't want a small head, I want something that's big. This guy's head looks big, and I think he's gonna work perfectly for John Henry. So what am I gonna do with his body? I don't know. Maybe, he's got a coat. Who knows? I'll use it for something down the road. This will give me some fodder, some parts, and we'll see how well they work with Mcfarlane's. But I thought this was a clever way to go about doing the head without just repeating the John Stewart head or the bald heads that we've already used on other figures. So this guy is gonna be our head. Let's go ahead and get started on Steel. First things first. So I removed Superman's wing cape things and the wrestling character's head, and we've got it here. Now his neck hole here is too big for this, but it also needs to be drilled down a little bit. So that's going to be our first thing so that his head can fit. But as you can see, the size of the head is perfect because this is supposed to be a man who has his head inside of a helmet, right? I hate when they make the heads too small, and they tend to do that with Steel figures. So I think this one is going to turn out absolutely perfect. So let's drill a hole. Ta-da! You can move him, but he still comes off a little bit easy. So in these circumstances, I might put in a little bit of putty or something just to make sure that it stays. But so you can see, it looks good on the neck. It looks like it naturally should. Obviously, Steel does not have a beard, so what we're going to do is we're going to take some sandpaper and we're just going to sand down the beard. Once it's painted, it would be really hard to kind of see anyway, but I really don't want any of the grooves there that are in the plastic, so I'm just going to shave down the beard. Last but not least with this guy is that Steel has rivets going up his forehead. So I'm going to put a little bit of fabric paint in dots going up his forehead because it'll be a little bit more three-dimensional. I'll probably do 2 coats on this just to make sure that they stand out, but they will do the trick. He's looking good. We're almost ready to spray paint this guy. Got his nice 3D rivets on his head, but as you can see with the new head, the neck is really thin, and as I mentioned before, I do not like how thin the waist is. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna take this guy. Basically, I used the head for my Purge figure, and I just kind of put this stuff on here as a placeholder. But I've always figured that I would use these little, whatever they are, coils or tubes or whatever, and I'm going to cut them off and use them to thicken up parts of this body because, Steel had these sorts of things on his legs and stuff, so it'll be a great way to just thicken him up. He looks kind of weird at this point, but this is where we want him to be for the spray painting. So what I did is obviously I went through and glued these on. I then added a layer of fabric paint behind that just is going to help secure those in place so they don't get knocked off. Because sometimes, super glue can get brittle. What I want is for this to stay forever, so I added that little layer. Then I added some clay up here just to fill in because it looked like he just had this tiny little neck with this head. I didn't like it. And then I painted it. I put on a layer of silver paint just so that in the course of future events, if there's any chipping in there, which I haven't noticed before with any of the times I've used this clay, but I just wanted to make sure there was a paint layer that's also protecting with the spray paint layer, and that's what we're moving on to. I think this guy's gonna look awesome in about 5 minutes when he's spray painted, so let's go out there and do it. Nothing more complicated than some silver paint. And here we go. I didn't go with a chrome. I wanted to go with more metallic, so this won't be quite as shiny as some of the other stuff we've done, but it should look great. He's put back together, nice and silver, a little bit more silver than I thought that the paint would be. I thought it was going to be a little bit duller, but this is pretty chrome at this point. And the spray paint took a while to kind of set. Like, it's been 3 days, and even yesterday, like, I could touch it and still come off completely like it hadn't dried at all in some places. It seems today it's much better. I put a layer of some of the craft paint just to help it in some spots that were having a hard time. So what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna take our shiny blue and we're gonna go over some of these areas just nice and lightly because I want this to look like the original. He's had, you know, I could do it in black like he's had where he's been black before in some of these areas. I want him to be kind of how he looks now and originally, where it's a little bit lighter blue in some places. So we're just going to experiment. We're going to have some fun. Let's paint this guy. I'm just going to go through and I'm going to use this, but I'm going to move it all around. Remember how we did it with the frost giant? Just by taking a little bit and moving it around, see, it adds that tint. That's all I want, is I want the tint. I don't want it to be too much. Because the original one, it didn't have a really strong blue to the point where most people don't even realize that he had any blue on him at all. But he did. He was quite blue tinted on these areas. So let's just get it so that it's nice and light. We're going to go over all these areas, and it's going to help with some of this silver being crappy. Because remember when I showed how to do all of this stuff and I said with the spray paint to make sure you get a plastic, you know, the spray paint that's specifically made for plastic? Well, I did not do that this time. I was just like, oh, silver, cool. And it sucked. So I need to follow my own advice from here on out and make sure I'm getting a spray paint that is specific for use on plastic. He's looking pretty good color-wise. I'm going to go ahead and take this opportunity while he's dry to paint on the eyes. So I'm just going to do white. That's all he had. Using the magnifying glass here. And let's get him some eyes here. Not too terrible. I love this magnifying glass, by the way. For those of you who don't have one, you need to invest. They are wonderful. So we're just going to use a little bit of red Vallejo paint, and we're going to paint this part of the cape right now. Everything is dry, and we're moving right along, and I figured why not? Got some time. So here we go. This is a very, very simple part. I picked a more muted red, not something that's so shiny or cherry red, because it's going to be the entire cape on the back. And so I figured having something that looked a little bit more cloth-like was a good choice. While he's drying, we're going to take a look at the cape. Now, this is a cape from the, I don't even remember, like the Dark Side Batman, whatever. I've got it. We're going to cut off with a razor blade. We're just going to cut off the end here, and then we'll cut off the top, and we'll glue it to the back. So let's just go ahead and start cutting. Nice and simple here. I'm going to cut as close to the end as I can, because I'm not sure how tall this is all going to be, but as you can see, it cuts nice and easy with a nice sharp razor. And there we go. Cut off this little end. And we've got a flat cape. And now, using the same paint as we did for the top part of the cape, we're now just going to paint this bad boy. So I'm going to come in with the big brush, just start getting coverage. Look at that. This goes real fast. That's the joy of, you know, when you're painting something big like this, it goes real quick. The facial features on this guy have been muted quite a bit because of the paint. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some fabric paint just to thicken things up. So I'm going to go over the eyebrows, I'm going to go over the lips, and go over the nose, just so that the features stand out a little bit more, because everything has been muted now that we've got like 2 layers of paint. And now that we have 2 layers of paint on the head, you can see that it's just not as smooth in some places. So I'm going to take this really soft sandpaper and I'm just going to go over some of these areas and smooth them out. It's going to take off a little bit of the paint in some places, but I would rather have that and have more of a smooth texture. But you can see how just with the lips and the nose and the eyebrows, he just looks more like steel, because he almost looked faceless by the time of that last paint that I put on. And at this point, there's so many layers of paint on it. I mean, there's probably at least 3 that I'm not really taking anything off. It's not going down to the skin. It's just going through a couple of different layers. And so I think it's going to turn out looking pretty good just with a little bit of rubbing from this stuff. So I want to experiment a little bit with some wash here. So I'm just going to go through, I want to hit some of these areas and just darken them up. I think that like it's looking metally, but it's not looking as metally as I would like. And I think this is going to do some of that. So I'm going to go through just in some of these areas. I'm going to do what I always do, where I'm just going to move this around and add this so that we can start to get just a different feel for some of these areas and have them stand out. So I'm going to go through these areas here and really just hopefully make this look a little bit more metal and make it stand out a little bit more. That's what I want to do. The part I'm having the hardest time with is the face. I like that I've gone through and added more textures to it and made the features a little bit more, stand outish, but it still just doesn't have the smoothness of the rest of the body. So I'm going to add a little bit of shading here, just in the eyes and around the lips, just to see what I can get. As you can see, it just doesn't have as smooth of a texture as the rest of it because of the couple different layers of paint I've had to put on it. So let's just see what we can do here and maybe make things stand out a little bit more. And remember, things do go a little screwy with the oil. You can just kind of pull it off that way. I really can't do much else to this guy, honestly. I think I've done too much when it comes to the paint. This has been a really good learning experience, but it's also not turning out the way necessarily that I want it to. So maybe in the future I'll have to revisit doing steel. What I'm doing right now is I'm going to resin his cape in place. So I could just super glue it, but I figured this needs something a little bit thicker. And so I'm using a mixture resin where I have to mix equal amounts of these 2 things and then put it on there. So just using this cup. Ooh, it smells really nice. Ooh. And I'm going to mix it up and then I'm going to put it on his back and we're going to resin this cape in place. So I'm going to scoop it up, pop it all right here. Ooh, hopefully not get it too much on him. That's not what I want. I don't want to get it all over him. And I'm probably going to have to put something on it to hold it because I don't think this is like necessarily super glue. So it's going to need to be pressed for a while. So let's let this sit. And before we get to the finished product, there is one more thing we need to do, and that is steel has a hammer. So I don't have a hammer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut. This is just some random, I don't even know what this is. It's just some random piece I had in my drawer. I'm going to cut it right here. We're going to put some of the clay inside of it, and then we're going to use this as the handle, shove it up in there, and that's going to be his hammer. I think it'll look cool. I want it to look, real. So, all right, let's get to it. Well, that cape is not coming off, and I think it's time I'm going to spray him with a coat of enamel and call it good. Again, it's not as perfect as I would like, but this is a learning experience, and I think in the future we can try it again and do a better job. But for now, this is steel. All right, here he is. Like I said, this was a really good learning experience for me. The base coat paint that I used was not really what I was looking for, what I was expecting, and it wasn't a specific plastic one, and so it caused me some problems. But overall, with the experimentation on this guy, I'm really happy with how he turned out, just the different shades. I think in the future, I'm going to redo it, and I'm going to be doing different things with the face. I'm really happy, again, with how the face turned out, just thickening up some of those features over the paint. Help them to be very original looking and look a little bit more like steel as opposed to just some random wrestling figure. So here he is in all of his imperfect glory, but I'm really happy with him. So hopefully you guys like him. Feel free to leave comments. Tell me if there's any specific characters you guys would like to see me do in the coming weeks and months, and I will make sure that I do them. For now, this guy's going to go with the Superman on the shelf, and I'm very, very happy about him. So there you go for this week, guys. I'm Stephen Human. Check out stephenhuman.com if you want to read any of my books, and I'll see you guys next week.